When I was about to leave school, British Motor Corporation, if you people remember, BMC, asked if I would study engineering at Birmingham University, to return home to Malaysia and help set up their assembly plant. And then I remembered that my grandmother suffered poor health and suffered poor medical care. I then approached my late father and asked him if he would support me and send me to medical school. So my parents worked very hard, saved, and I went to Sheffield. Today, I'm a GP looking after some of the 10% poorest in our society. I'd like to share with you tonight some of my observations of the NHS and the changes that are being made to our healthcare system. Some of them have been alluded to by the previous speakers, especially Sally, but I shall add my thoughts on the matter. When I was a medical student in Sheffield, I was attached during my GP period to a doctor who covered all his shifts. He worked without appointments, 2 surgeries a day, and during the weekends and overnight, he shared it with 2 other colleagues. He worked very hard, he respected all his patients, and his patients loved him for his kindness and acumen. What I'd like to do is to appeal to you that we, in our own way, either through the electoral system or through pressure by lobby groups, to try and bring back those values in the NHS. So fast forward from the days of being attached to that GP who went around doing his phone calls, 2 surgeries a day, to this notice which my daughter sent me a few weeks ago. It really puzzled me because that is not the ethos I worked to when I was a medical student, when I was a junior doctor. Does that mean that anything that troubles you will be sorted out in 10 minutes? Or does it mean that you're only allowed 10 minutes to speak to your GP? And are you only allowed 1 problem during that 10-minute consultation? I don't blame the GP for putting that notice up. I think it's the system that has created such behavior. And underlying that sort of behavior is something I call micromanagement. Micromanagement is actually a result of trying to work out how best to offer financial recompense and match it to contractual obligations. Unfortunately, the situation with pay is part of a wider battle between opposing political ideologies. But there are certain fundamental flaws. For example, the biology of health and disease does not exist in rigid compartments. So I say this: the division into primary, secondary, and tertiary care is artificial. Health is health, and disease should be managed as appropriately, as the condition requires. The other thing is, I think it's archaic for us in this day and age to segment pay. If you remember the days when your GP came to see you and then went back to do his work, I don't think we need to think about how many days he spent sitting at a desk, how many days were actually out visiting patients. I think for a junior doctor, the time he spends in the clinic, in the theatre, in the outpatients, and whether he works daytime or nighttime, weekends, they should all be part of an integral package of pay. Because the time he spends across all those periods are part of his need to acquire skills and develop competence. So it should be one integral payment. So what is micromanagement? What do I mean by that? Well, pay is the reward that follows output, and management is the process that generates the pay conditions. But micromanagement, unfortunately, produces work to do. the more details there are in the rules, the greater the burden and the less productivity, and quality is put at risk. And when you create rules, people work to the rules. It discourages initiative and resourcefulness. What happens then is the doctors would work to the standards expected of them, but no more, because there's no reason to work any harder, any better, except to perform to the target set. And targets has a very perverse way of actually modifying behavior. What it is we produce the sort of standards they expect, but everybody just tries to do the same, and therefore it ends up being quite mediocre. And while we're trying to set those standards up, we adopt an attitude of following the payment. So eventually, payment corrupts our professional behavior. How do we then modify that behavior? Well, there are three essential elements in the health system. There are three players. There's the government, the public, and the doctors. And there are three parameters, roughly, to which we work to. One is the rights, the next is responsibilities, and then there's accountability. The interaction of all these three elements by the three players is what is referred to as the tripartite compact. So in very simple terms, to try to keep it simple, is that the government collects money, and if you look at the big side, that's the taxes. It pays the doctors to look after the patients. So I've drawn in diagrammatic form the arrows of interaction, but there's a very big pound sign there. The NHS today is run on what we call the equality model, because the most efficient way of actually looking after all of society is to find the biggest pool, and the pool which is thought to be the most equitable. And taxation is the best way to fund it. But unfortunately, the best way also to keep within so-called budgets is by rationing. Now, if you don't ration and you give people autonomy, then you have less in the pool. But the more you ration, the more you take away from people, the more tightly you control, the less there is financial autonomy. By financial autonomy, I mean the ability to spend as you choose. So we've come to a stage, because of the spending demands, we have to realign the tripartite compact. So what we do is we look at funding and we split it up. So the government has approached this with devolving the money to patients. So we come to an era where we now have personal health budgets, and that's on an individual basis. On the regional macro basis, we have things, as Sally referred to, the mobilization. So we have, for example, on the regional scale, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. They get a huge funding, and they work on how to distribute the funds and provide services. It's all right to say patients will have the autonomy to decide what they can buy with the money. But unfortunately, a lot of patients do not know what's best for them. The other thing is, when the limit is reached, what will happen? Who will then pay for the extras? The details of the personal health budget is found in the Department of Health website. But the experiment is being extended to other areas too. Maternity is a very interesting area to try this out, because it's very circumscribed. You get pregnant, you produce the baby, and that's maternity over. In fact, Sky reports they should be given £3,000 per childbirth. If that's the value offered to me, I would get pregnant several times over. There is a solidarity model, and that is very straightforward. It recognizes that you pay taxes for community and social good, but you also pay some of the money to choose what you want to do with it. So I think in terms of fairness to those who can afford and those who can't, if we allow those who can pay to pay for their way through, the funds that are collected for general social need would be helping the people at the poorest level of society. The best system, the fairest system that approximates to this is the one operated by Singapore, which in 2014 was voted by Bloomberg as the most efficient healthcare system in the world. But unfortunately, the Singapore system is predicated on very low unemployment and also a society steeped in Confucian values. Predominantly, everybody working hard and contributing for the good of all. For the NHS to reach that level of equity, we need to reduce our unemployment level. And we need to do what Sanjeev referred to, that we must all move away from the victim mode and all start working where we can and do what we can. So what is the next stage of the NHS? Where is it going to go? Well, I have several reservations. A lot of the funding in the NHS depends on the outcome of the referendum. We know today, as we speak, there is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is a series of trade negotiations largely held in secret between the EU and the United States. I have grave reservations because of the legalities involved and the compensation and the lawsuits that can follow any mishaps in partnerships and contracts. What we don't want to do is a deal not authorized by the electorate, which will bankrupt the NHS and destroy our healthcare. So what I would say is this. At the referendum, we have to think very clearly. Do we want our autonomy, our sovereignty to decide the NHS that we want and we want to configure for our generations to come? There is also a problem with ethos. I would appeal to those who draw policy to think very carefully. I think it's very anomalous that we pick the best and the brightest in for the medical school, and then find that when they reach the professional stage to have their instinctive quest for excellence and humanity pruned by adverse incentives. So I end with this note. I've set off on my personal journey, and what I'd like to do now is to devote the rest of my working life to modifying behavior at management level and also to influence politicians so that we can have a brighter future for our generations to come. Thank you.